very much, and welcome. Welcome to a conversation with Raymond Turner. Are you ready to be inspired? I'm telling you. Our speaker is the recording studio producer at Cook Children's Medical Center in Fort Worth, Texas. He is multi-talented. He's a producer, he's a musician, he is an arranger, he's an educator, he does it all. And he's a great guy who has lived an amazing life. In fact, his life probably could be the lyrics to a country western music song. It could be a rhythm and blues ballad. It could be the orchestration to a great symphony. He's lived and done so much. With his presentation, Overcoming the Odds, please welcome Raymond Turner.
I am so very grateful to be here with you all because the truth of the matter is I should not be here. Like many stories that begin with a blank page or a composer who starts writing with a blank piece of staff paper, my story started very much the same, but except my song started a little bit earlier. I was born too much prematurely, and at the time I was born in a very small town with a very small hospital. They didn't have a NICU. They didn't have a way to really care for me in that condition. My family didn't have the resources to take me to another facility to get adequate care. And my mother, having had me at a very young age, and because I was so frail, was a little bit afraid to take care of me. And so my grandmother took it upon herself after coming to the hospital to see me, and she took a chance and took me home and actually began to care for me, ended up caring for me for the next 16 years. And she often relates the story of how she would take a paper towel and cut it into fourths because I couldn't wear a diaper, or she would take an eyedropper and feed me because I couldn't take a baby bottle. And she was the one who believed in me, even when the prognosis came from the doctors that if I did live, I would be a vegetable. And so from very early on, she would tell me that story, and it began to really imbue in me what I like to call my Saving Private Ryan moment. And many of you may know that story, but it's the story of these 4 soldiers who were 3 of them were killed, and they sent a squad to find the youngest brother and to bring him home. And many of these men risked their lives. And at the very end of the movie, this James Ryan is at the graveside of the sergeant, and he's asking himself the question and agonizing over whether or not the life he lived was worth the sacrifice of these men. And so my grandmother telling me this story very early on, it gave me this sense of purpose. And even from an early age, I began to ask the question, why am I here? And beginning to realize that I wanted to live up to the purpose or what I had been given with my life at that point. But I'll never forget the moment that changed my life in 7th grade, and it was an English class. And one day my English teacher walked over to me, and she had the same look that Miss Thomas had in her eyes, and I didn't realize I'd been tapping on my desk. And she told me, if you're going to do that, maybe you should join the band. And so I took that as a challenge. I did join the band. I walked into the band hall, and I'll never forget, the moment I walked in, I realized that that was my destiny. I realized that that was what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And it's one of those moments, pivotal moments, I will never forget. We moved from there into the family years, and I began to have people come in and out of my life who inspired me and who overcame as well. There's one man in particular who grew up as an orphan in Guatemala, grew up on the streets of Guatemala from the time he was, I think, about 6 until he was about 16. And little did I know that our lives would intersect and that that man would become my father-in-law. And that same spirit of overcoming flowed over into his daughter, now my wife. And we got married, we got pregnant with our first child, our daughter. And we realized very quickly that there was something not quite right. And throughout the first part of the pregnancy, we prayed, we hoped, and there were moments where things looked hopeful. And then there was one day about 5 months into the pregnancy where we went to a normal checkup, normal session. And we heard or did not hear something that every parent in that moment is longing to hear. And that was the sound of silence, where there was no heartbeat. And I can't tell you, in that moment, there were feelings that began to surface that had not surfaced previously to that extent. Out of all that I had gone through, anger, questioning why. And this was also a season where there were musical elements also beginning to be birthed out of that moment. We moved along. 2 years after that, became pregnant again with our first boy. And everything is moving along, pregnancy, and there were some challenges there as well. And after we had our son, we were walking out of the hospital. The doors opened. We stepped out. We stepped out to go to the car, and he started having a seizure. We literally turned around and walked back into the hospital, where he was immediately hooked up and in the NICU for about a month. Unexplainable seizures. We don't know what's going on. And the doctor related to us that there would probably be some brain damage and some developmental issues. And in that moment, I turned to the two things that I knew was my faith in the God who had given me my Saving Private Ryan moment. And then musically, I began to explore some areas of music and its effect on the brain, because I knew that there were some things there that at least I could try to do. I could try to figure that out and do what I could to help my son. I believe that the music that had healed me could also heal my son. I didn't realize that all of those painful experiences that we had gone through would begin to culminate in the place where I would ultimately end up. And I like to think of it as there are moments that reach out to you, and we call these opportunities of a lifetime. And then there are those moments, and they're usually singular, that reach out and they take hold of you. And you step out of darkness into what I like to call a lifetime of opportunities. And that was the moment when I stepped into Cook Children's and realized that I'd stepped out of this shadow, out of this place of sleepwalking, into what I was ultimately created to do. And I didn't realize that many of those experiences that I had gone through would shape me to be able to walk through some very dark places with patients and families who go through some of the darkest moments of their life. I didn't realize that enduring and overcoming would be the one thing that would qualify me to sit with people in the ashes of their pain. And one of the reasons we named the studio that we have at Cook Children's Sparklefly Studio is the concept of fireflies. We're so fascinated with fireflies because you don't have to plug them in. They just light up. And oftentimes it's against the darkest places, the darkest times, that you see the fireflies, they light up. And it's a fire from inside of them. It's not something that you plug into a wall. It comes from within them. And I learned through this process, through walking with patients and families, that there is a fire inside of them. There is a fire inside of you that can light up the darkest places. And that's a reminder every time I walk into the studio, that is who we are. That is who we are.
Oh, I pass the stars, I pass the moon. My soul is taken, but not from you. I see you again, without the pain, without the shame, without the chains.
This photo is very special. My wife took this very candid photo as I rushed one night to grab a piece of staff paper and write down an idea before I forgot it. And I keep it in front of me as a reminder of the master composer, and that many times in our lives, there are melodies being written. There are high points and there are low points. And I experienced one of those days recently where we had a patient, and many times we get the testimony of patients who, are at different stages in their treatment, but a patient came in for a songwriting session, and she left immediately after that for an appointment. And she came back in and said that her scans were clear. That's a high melody. Within half an hour, I got a phone call that another patient whose voice you just heard in the last clip that we played, that was now her legacy song. That was the song that we have left on this side from her song of overcoming that gift that she left. And so we have those moments, and I never imagined that when we sat in that room and heard and did not hear the heartbeat that we wanted to hear from our daughter, I never realized that one day I would be sitting in a room with the heartbeat of other parents setting music to the heartbeat to give back to them forever. I didn't realize that when we were sitting in the labor and delivery room and I was holding my wife, waiting for her to give birth to our lifeless daughter, that one day I would be sitting or standing in another room from parents who requested that I be there when they turn off the machine that was keeping their child alive. I never realized that the music that we cultivated to help our son, I never realized that one day I would be standing in a studio with another parent crying because her young autistic son was experiencing things with music and doing things he had never done before. And so these redemptive moments, they come into our life. And the question becomes, what is your life song? What is your life song? We overcome when we realize that every single life has a song. Some of the most dissonant moments of our lives combine with some of the harmonious and melodious moments to create this fabric and this tapestry, this song of our lives. And one thing I do know is that you have a song. And the world is a quieter place without it. You have a gift that you have been given. What song is your life singing? Because the gift that you have, someone else needs it. That is the song that will live on in your life and in my life long after we're gone. Thank you.
Wow, that was jam-packed. But basically, it said to me that every experience is for a reason, and that there is a purpose behind even the pain that you experience. Would you agree?
Absolutely. One of the important lessons that I think I've learned, especially with our daughter Grace, is just the reality that it didn't happen because God was punishing us or for anything that we did wrong. As a matter of fact, I would almost spin that and say it was because God loved us enough to entrust us with that pain, realizing that there would come a day when we would be entrusted to hand that, not hand it off, but to be able to walk with other people through their journey and to sit with them many times in the ashes of dreams that have burned to the ground, hopes that they've had, children that they have lost, heartbeats that I set music to and realized that that was everything that those parents had prayed for, everything about that child. And so I think it's more, thinking of it more of a trust and realizing that everything that we go through is significant. There's no insignificant aspect to our lives, but in some way there's a redemptive part of that if we will allow it to soften our hearts and not allow the experiences to harden us. There will be songs in the night that come out of that, and others will be singing those same songs as they overcome in their lives as well.
So when I met you, I did not know that you had lost a child. In fact, your spirit never even indicated that there was that kind of turmoil, being born premature, being labeled different, having all of. I never got that from you. How is it that you can keep all of that and be so gracious and be so even in your demeanor, so that I'm not feeling the pain, anger, anguish, and the things that you go through? Because not only have you gone through it with your own life, but you're sitting, like you said, next to those parents who are going through it, but I don't feel that from you. How is that possible?
I think I would summarize it in one: expectation versus expectancy, I think is the way I would describe that. Mm-hmm. So from the very beginning, I grew up feeling not that I was owed something. From the very beginning, hearing my story, my grandmother tell the story of my life, that created this sense of gratefulness. So I realized that from that moment on, with the life that I was given, everything from that point was a blessing. So I never felt like anyone owed me anything. I was thankful for everything that came beyond that point, if that makes sense. So there was not a sense of expectation, but a sense of expectancy that with that life I was given, I knew that there was a responsibility. And I just began very, very early on within that gratitude to realize that I had a responsibility to live my life well, because at some point I would be accountable for that. And early on, I that didn't just come up from within me. That was just something a sense that I grew up with. And so I think it tenderized my heart towards people, and just to begin to look at them with compassion and from a place of realizing that every single one of us is more fragile than we realized, but also more loved than we realized. And so that's what I try to carry with me.
You, of course, having lost your precious Grace, and now at a point where you sit with parents who are about to lose their children, but you're sitting with them, listening to those last heartbeats, making that song. How do you not go back time and time and time again to that place where you didn't hear that heartbeat from your daughter?
In reality, there are moments that I do. And normally when I'm working on one of those heartbeats, I have to close the doors to the studio because it becomes a very sacred moment for me. I feel like I'm handling something that is very holy, to put that word on it. And so when the emotions come, I realize that I'm human, and that's a part of me that's still alive, and so I allow it to come, and I weep. But at the same time, what a privilege it is to be able to sit with those parents and those heartbeats and realize that what my wife and I didn't get to experience, I think of it as what a gift to be able to hand back now to someone else with the recognition of what we have gone through. And it's just that element of this is part of that process. This is also part of that healing process of giving out of what I don't feel like I have to give. But I also look at it almost studying music and sound waves. It's taught me this one thing, and I think this may correlate, is when you stand in a canyon or you're in a valley and you say a word, you may speak one word, but what comes back is this cacophony of echoes that comes back to you. And so that's the way I think of it, as our daughter was basically kind of the seed that we planted, that thing that went out. And what I get to do is I get to sit and hear this cacophony of echoes come back to me. And that is just an honor. It's an honor to be able to sit with our parents and families and to be able to give that back to them.
Raymond, thank you so much. It was so brave and courageous for you to be able to just expel all of that and allow us a peek into the life and how you've overcome. And I think we're richer and better for that. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Well, thank you so much. It's been an honor to be here with you today.